Sanders Nation.
Well, I don't know what you call your fan base, but
I don't be calling it what? They fan, like, it's a group of individual people that have their own, their own thoughts. So I can't control nothing.
You know who you are. You know what your pedigree is. You got to watch yourself. But in the same breath, y'all, when it comes to speeding, I mean, damn, there's a whole bunch of us, regardless of age. That ain't got nothing to do with maturity. A whole bunch of us make those mistakes.
Speeding is one thing, but going 40 miles an hour over the speed limit, actually 41 miles an hour over the speed limit at 12:30 in the morning, when you're in the middle of a four-way quarterback competition.
He's talking about overall in life. I made some wrong choices personally, and I got owned up to him. I made some, not great choices.
He's saying that because he's an accountable person.
I learned
from the real people.
I learned.
It's not. He don't be doing it.
I learned.
We're gonna find a way to make this about football, right? And instead of talking how good he's playing in OTAs, how he's playing so well that as a fifth rounder, we talking about, hey, let's split some of these reps up with the ones. Yeah. We're not gonna talk about that. Oh, he's immature. How can he lead a team if he's driving? They're gonna find a way to make an excuse for Shedeur, and I hate that.
Number one, get your butt in the house at a good time, right? Because it's lessons. Number two, Mama used to tell me a lot of stuff, but Grandma taught me a lot too.
Okay.
And Grandma always used to tell me once I started making plays and all that in college, she said, grandson, it's a lot of people want to see you lose. Don't give them any opportunity to see you lose. Handle your business.
What happens when a media personality tries to destroy a young quarterback's reputation, only to have their own dirty laundry exposed for the world to see? You're about to witness one of the most spectacular media backfires in recent sports history. I'm talking about Mary Kay Cabot's vicious attack on Shedeur Sanders over a speeding ticket and how it completely exploded in her face when Baker Mayfield's brutal takedown resurfaced and the internet started digging into her own family's criminal background. This isn't just about a traffic violation. This is about media manipulation, double standards, and what happens when the hunter becomes the hunted. Stick around, because what I'm about to show you will change how you view sports journalism forever. Before we dive into this drama, let me set the stage. Shedeur Sanders, son of Coach Prime, gets pulled over for speeding? Simple mistake, right? Wrong. What should have been a minor news blip turned into a character assassination attempt by Mary Kay Cabot, a Cleveland sports reporter with a history of controversial takes. But here's where it gets interesting, and this is something most people missed. This isn't Cabot's first rodeo when it comes to attacking young quarterbacks. Remember Baker Mayfield? He had some choice words for her back in the day, and those words are now going viral again. But that's just the beginning. What happened next will shock you, and it reveals a disturbing pattern in how certain media figures operate. We're going to break down exactly how this controversy unfolded, why it matters beyond sports, and how the tables turned so dramatically that Cabot herself became the story. Let's start with what actually happened, because the facts matter and they're very different from how Mary Kay Cabot presented them. Shedeur Sanders was pulled over for speeding 41 miles over the limit at 12:05 a.m. Yes, that's excessive. Yes, it was a mistake. But here's what Cabot did that crossed the line from reporting into character assassination. Instead of simply reporting the facts, Cabot weaponized every detail to paint the darkest possible picture. She didn't just mention the speeding, she emphasized the time, 12:05 a.m., as if being out past midnight automatically makes you a delinquent. She didn't just report the speed. She highlighted a staggering 30 miles over the limit, with the kind of dramatic language you'd use to describe a bank robbery. And here's the kicker, she claimed he was racing another driver, without providing concrete evidence of actual racing. But wait, it gets worse. Cabot then connected this single incident to Shedeur's entire character and future prospects. She wrote, "This is not what you want from your quarterback," essentially suggesting that one traffic violation disqualifies him from leadership. She implied this could jeopardize his position on the roster and questioned his discipline both on and off the field. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever gotten a speeding ticket? Have you ever made a mistake as a young person? Because according to Cabot's logic, that single moment of poor judgment defines your entire character and professional capability. This is where journalism crosses into something much more sinister. What's particularly disturbing is the timing and focus of Cabot's coverage. She rarely, if ever, highlights Shedeur's stellar on-field performances, his leadership qualities, or his academic achievements. But the moment he makes a human mistake, she pounces like a predator who's been waiting in the shadows. This isn't journalism, it's agenda-driven character assassination. The most telling part, Cabot framed this as being about discipline and maturity, but her own approach to the story showed neither. A disciplined journalist would have reported the facts without the inflammatory language. A mature approach would have acknowledged that young people make mistakes and learn from them. Instead, she chose sensationalism over substance. And here's what really exposes her bias: she completely ignored Shedeur's immediate, mature response to the incident. While she was busy crafting her hit piece, Shedeur was already taking full accountability, showing the exact kind of leadership and maturity she claimed he lacked. But acknowledging that wouldn't fit her narrative, would it? This pattern of selective outrage and disproportionate coverage reveals something troubling about how certain media figures operate. They're not interested in fair reporting. They're interested in creating controversy, generating clicks, and tearing down young athletes who don't fit their preferred narrative. And as we're about to see, this approach was about to backfire in the most spectacular way possible. Now here's where the story takes a fascinating turn. And it's a masterclass in how to handle criticism with grace and maturity. While Mary Kay Cabot was busy crafting her character assassination piece, Shedeur Sanders was doing something that completely undermined her entire narrative. He was taking full accountability like a true leader. Listen to how Shedeur responded. "I made some wrong choices personally, and I got to own up to them. I made some not great choices, and I learned from real people. No excuses, no deflection, no blaming others, just pure accountability." This is exactly the kind of leadership quality you want in a quarterback, but somehow Cabot missed this crucial detail in her rush to judgment. But Shedeur didn't stop there. When he saw Cabot's article, he could have lashed out, gotten defensive, or fired back with personal attacks. Instead, he delivered one of the most composed and powerful responses I've ever seen from a young athlete. Speaking calmly while having lunch, he said, "They tried to talk trash about me, but we are Sanders Nation, and we are not affected by it, but we cannot stop them as well." Think about the wisdom in that statement. He acknowledged the criticism without letting it define him. He recognized that he can't control what others say, but he can control how he responds. And most importantly, he positioned himself not as a victim, but as part of something bigger: Sanders Nation. This response revealed something that Cabot completely missed in her analysis. Shedeur Sanders isn't just an individual player making individual mistakes. He's part of a movement, a community, a legacy that extends far beyond any single incident. When he said Sanders Nation, he was invoking the support of thousands of fans, former players, and supporters who understand that character isn't defined by one mistake. It's defined by how you respond to that mistake. The reaction from Sanders Nation was swift and powerful. Social media exploded with support for Shedeur, but more importantly, it exposed something that Cabot probably never anticipated. People started paying attention to her pattern of coverage. Fans began pointing out how she rarely covered Shedeur's positive achievements, but was quick to amplify any negative incident. What's particularly striking is how Shedeur's response demonstrated emotional intelligence that many veteran players lack. He didn't take the bait. He didn't escalate the situation. Instead, he used it as a teaching moment, showing that true strength comes from accountability and unity, not from attacking your critics. This response also revealed the power of having a strong support system. The Sanders brand isn't just about individual success. It's about lifting each other up, learning from mistakes, and moving forward together. When Shedeur invoked Sanders Nation, he was reminding everyone that he's not facing this alone. But here's what makes this even more interesting: Shedeur's mature response was about to be validated by some unexpected allies, including a former NFL quarterback who had his own history with Mary Kay Cabot. And that's where the story gets really explosive. Just when you thought this story couldn't get more interesting, the internet did what the internet does best: it started digging. And what they found was a smoking gun that completely validated everything Shedeur Sanders supporters were saying about Mary Kay Cabot's biased reporting. A tweet from former Cleveland Browns quarterback Baker Mayfield suddenly resurfaced and started going viral. In this tweet, Baker didn't hold back. He directly called out Mary Kay Cabot, labeling her as clickbait without any facts and figures. Now, this wasn't a new tweet, but its timing couldn't have been more perfect. It was like finding the missing piece of a puzzle that suddenly made the whole picture crystal clear. Think about the significance of this moment. Here's a former NFL quarterback, someone who actually played at the highest level, someone who understands the pressures and scrutiny that come with the position, calling out the exact same reporter for the exact same type of biased coverage. This wasn't just a coincidence. This was a pattern. Baker's tweet gained renewed attention because fans immediately drew parallels between his past clashes with Cabot and what was happening to Shedeur. The similarities were striking. A young quarterback making human mistakes, Cabot amplifying those mistakes with inflammatory language, and the quarterback having to defend himself against disproportionate criticism. But here's what makes Baker's intervention so powerful: he had nothing to gain from defending Shedeur. He's no longer with the Browns. He's established in his career, and he could have easily stayed out of the controversy. But he chose to speak up because he recognized the pattern, and understood the damage that biased reporting can do to young athletes. Social media exploded with reactions to Baker's resurfaced tweet. Fans started using it as evidence of what they were now calling Mary Kay Cabot's drama, a pattern of creating controversy rather than reporting news. The hashtag clickbait Cabot started trending, and suddenly the narrative shifted completely. What's particularly damning is how Baker's tweet exposed the methodology behind Cabot's reporting. Clickbait without facts and figures. That's not just an insult. It's a professional critique of journalistic standards. Baker was essentially saying that Cabot prioritizes sensationalism over accuracy, controversy over context. The timing of this resurfaced tweet also highlighted something crucial about the digital age. Nothing disappears forever. Cabot's pattern of biased reporting was now being documented and shared across social media platforms. Screenshots, old articles, and previous controversies were being compiled into a comprehensive case study of media bias. But perhaps most importantly, Baker's tweet gave other people permission to speak up. When a former NFL quarterback calls out a reporter's bias, it validates what fans and supporters have been saying all along. It transforms individual complaints into a collective recognition of a systemic problem. And as we're about to see, Baker's tweet was just the beginning. Other high-profile figures were about to join the conversation, and the revelations about Mary Kay Cabot's background were about to get much more explosive. When Stephen A. Smith, one of the most recognizable voices in sports media, stepped into this controversy, you knew things were about to get real. And Stephen A. didn't just defend Shedeur Sanders. He delivered a masterclass in perspective that completely dismantled Mary Kay Cabot's entire argument. Speaking on his show, Stephen A. made a point that should have been obvious, but somehow got lost in all the manufactured outrage. It's not that big of a deal. But he didn't stop there. He went deeper, addressing the fundamental hypocrisy in how we scrutinize young athletes compared to everyone else. When it comes to speeding, we've all made that mistake, whether we're young or old, Stephen A. said, and then he delivered the knockout punch. There's a whole bunch of us, regardless of age, that ain't got nothing to do with maturity. A whole bunch of us make those mistakes. Think about the power of that statement. Here's one of the most successful media personalities in America, admitting that speeding isn't a character flaw. It's a human mistake that transcends age, maturity, and professional status. He was essentially calling out the double standard that allows media figures to judge athletes by standards they don't apply to themselves. But Stephen A.'s defense went beyond just the speeding incident. He addressed something much more insidious: the tendency to use minor mistakes to question someone's entire character and potential. You know who you are. You know what your pedigree is. You gotta watch yourself, he said, acknowledging that public figures need to be more careful, but then adding the crucial caveat that mistakes don't define character. What made Stephen A.'s intervention so powerful was his credibility. This isn't some random social media user or biased fan. This is someone who's built a career on honest, sometimes harsh analysis of athletes and sports figures. When Stephen A. Smith says you're overreacting, you're probably overreacting. His comments also highlighted the generational and cultural dynamics at play in this controversy. Stephen A. understood that young people, especially young black athletes, are often held to impossible standards. They're expected to be perfect role models while simultaneously being criticized for being too perfect or inauthentic. It's a no-win situation that Stephen A. recognized and called out. The timing of Stephen A.'s defense was also crucial. It came at a moment when the narrative was already shifting against Cabot, and his voice added legitimacy to what Sanders supporters had been saying all along. When someone of Stephen A.'s stature validates your position, it transforms the conversation from fan complaints to serious media criticism. But perhaps most importantly, Stephen A.'s defense exposed the absurdity of turning a traffic violation into a referendum on someone's character and leadership ability. He reminded everyone that we're talking about a young man who made a mistake, took accountability, and learned from it, which is exactly what we should want from our leader. And as we're about to see, Stephen A.'s defense was just the beginning of a much larger reckoning that was about to unfold. Here's where the story takes a turn that nobody, especially Mary Kay Cabot, saw coming. The internet, in all its investigative glory, decided to apply the same scrutiny to Cabot that she had applied to Shedeur Sanders. And what they found was absolutely explosive. Social media users began digging into Cabot's background with the same intensity that she had used to dissect Shedeur's speeding incident. But unlike Cabot's speculation and inflammatory language, these internet investigators came with receipts, screenshots, public documents, court records, and old news clippings that painted a very different picture of the woman who had positioned herself as a moral authority. What they uncovered was that several of Cabot's own family members had been involved in various criminal acts, incidents far more serious than a speeding ticket. The irony was palpable and devastating. Here was someone who had questioned a young man's character over a traffic violation, while her own family tree included much more serious legal issues. But here's what makes this revelation so significant. It wasn't just about hypocrisy, though that was certainly part of it. It was about the fundamental unfairness of the standards being applied. Cabot had suggested that Shedeur's speeding ticket reflected on his character, his leadership ability, and his fitness to be a quarterback. By that same logic, what did her family's more serious legal trouble say about her fitness to be a journalist and moral commentator? The internet didn't just find these records, they organized them, documented them, and shared them widely. Screenshots of court documents, links to news articles, and detailed timelines began circulating across social media platforms. The same digital tools that Cabot had used to amplify Shedeur's mistake were now being used to expose her own vulnerabilities. What's particularly striking is how quickly and thoroughly this information spread. Within hours, Cabot Exposed was trending, and detailed threads documenting her family's legal troubles were being shared thousands of times. The internet had essentially crowdsourced an investigation that revealed information Cabot probably never expected to become public. But this wasn't just about revenge or getting back at a biased reporter. It was about accountability and the application of consistent standards. If Cabot believed that personal mistakes and family associations reflected on someone's professional character, then she had to be held to the same standard. The revelation also highlighted something crucial about the digital age, the democratization of information and accountability. In the past, media figures like Cabot could attack public figures with relative impunity, knowing that their own backgrounds would likely remain unexamined. But social media has changed that dynamic completely. The most damaging aspect of these revelations wasn't necessarily the specific details of her family's legal troubles, it was how they completely undermined her moral authority to judge others. How can someone whose own family has serious legal issues position themselves as the arbiter of character and morality for young athletes? And as we're about to see, this internet investigation was just the beginning of a much larger reckoning that would involve other high-profile voices in sports media. Just when you thought this controversy couldn't get any more explosive, two NFL veterans with serious credibility stepped into the ring, and they didn't come to play games. Lezian McCoy and James Jones brought perspectives that completely dismantled Mary Kay Cabot's narrative while exposing the deeper, more sinister patterns at work in sports media. Lezian McCoy came out swinging with surgical precision, identifying exactly what Cabot was doing and why it was so dangerous. "This is how they'll shape the narrative," McCoy said. And then he broke down the playbook that media figures like Cabot used to tear down young black athletes. They'll say things like he can't lead a team with this kind of attitude because they know they can't say anything about the way he plays. Think about the brilliance of McCoy's analysis. He wasn't just defending Shedeur, he was exposing an entire system of character assassination that operates when critics can't find fault with an athlete's performance. McCoy continued, "They're going to find a way to make this about football. And instead of talking about how good he's playing in OTAs, how he's playing so well that as a fifth rounder we're talking about splitting reps with the ones, we're not going to talk about that. Oh, he's immature. How can he lead a team if he's driving recklessly?" This wasn't just commentary, this was a masterclass in media literacy. McCoy was teaching viewers how to recognize when sports coverage crosses from legitimate analysis into agenda-driven character assassination. He was showing how a single incident gets weaponized to overshadow months of positive performance and development. But then James Jones entered the conversation with a perspective that was both personal and profound. Drawing from his own experience and family wisdom, Jones shared something his grandmother used to tell him. "When you rise in the spotlight for doing good, there will always be people waiting to see you fall. That's just how the world works." Jones's intervention was particularly powerful because it wasn't just about this specific incident, it was about the broader reality that successful young black athletes face. He acknowledged that Shedeur made a mistake, while simultaneously contextualizing it within the larger pattern of scrutiny and double standards that these athletes endure. "Number one, get your butt in the house at a good time," Jones said, offering practical advice while maintaining perspective. "But Grandma always used to tell me once I started making plays and all that in college, she said, 'Grandson, it's a lot of people want to see you lose. Don't give them any opportunity to see you lose. Handle your business the right way.'" What made Jones's comments so impactful was how they balanced accountability with understanding. He wasn't excusing the mistake, but he was providing the kind of mentorship and perspective that young athletes need, something that was completely absent from Cabot's coverage. Together, McCoy and Jones represented something that Cabot's reporting lacked entirely: the voices of people who had actually lived the experience of being young, talented, and under intense scrutiny. Their perspectives carried weight because they came from a place of understanding rather than judgment, experience rather than speculation. And their interventions were about to catalyze an even larger conversation about media accountability and the treatment of young athletes. What happened next was nothing short of extraordinary, a complete reversal of fortune that transformed Mary Kay Cabot from the hunter into the hunted, and turned what she intended as a takedown piece into a case study of media bias and accountability. Within just 72 hours, the entire narrative had flipped. What began as Cabot's attempt to question Shedeur Sanders' character and leadership had become a referendum on her own journalistic integrity and professional conduct. The very tactics she had used, selective focus, inflammatory language, and character assassination, were now being applied to her own background and reporting history. Social media became a digital courtroom where Cabot's journalistic record was being examined with the same intensity she had applied to Shedeur's personal life. Fans and critics compiled extensive threads documenting her pattern of biased coverage, selective outrage, and sensationalized reporting. Screenshots of old articles, controversial takes, and inflammatory headlines were organized into comprehensive evidence of systematic bias. But this wasn't just about one reporter or one incident. It represented something much larger. The Shedeur Sanders controversy had become a catalyst for a broader conversation about media accountability in the digital age. People were finally asking the questions that should have been asked long ago. Who holds the media accountable? What happens when reporters cross the line from journalism into character assassination? And why are young athletes, particularly young black athletes, held to standards that their critics don't apply to themselves? The speed and thoroughness of this reversal revealed something crucial about the changing dynamics of media power. In the past, reporters like Cabot could publish inflammatory pieces with relative impunity, knowing that their subjects had limited platforms to respond, and that public attention would quickly move on to other stories. But social media has fundamentally changed that equation. Now, every article can be screenshot, every pattern can be documented, and every double standard can be exposed in real time. The same digital tools that allow for rapid dissemination of news also enable rapid accountability for those who abuse their platforms. What made this reversal particularly devastating for Cabot was how it exposed the fundamental weakness in her original argument. She had suggested that a single mistake, a speeding ticket, reflected on Shedeur's entire character and professional capability. But when that same standard was applied to her own background and reporting history, the results were far more damaging to her credibility than a traffic violation could ever be to a young athlete's. The involvement of high-profile figures like Baker Mayfield, Stephen A. Smith, Lizzie McCoy, and James Jones transformed this from a simple controversy into a teachable moment about media literacy, accountability, and the treatment of young athletes. Their voices provided the credibility and platform necessary to challenge not just Cabot's specific coverage, but the broader patterns of bias and sensationalism that plague sports journalism. Perhaps most importantly, this reversal demonstrated the power of unity and collective action. When Sanders Nation rallied around Shedeur, when former players spoke up about double standards, and when fans demanded better from sports media, they created a force that was impossible to ignore. The message was clear: the days of unchecked media bias and character assassination are numbered. So here we are, witnessing one of the most spectacular media backfires in recent sports history. What Mary Kay Cabot intended as a character assassination of Shedeur Sanders became a masterclass in how not to practice journalism, and more importantly, how the digital age has fundamentally changed the power dynamics between media figures and their subjects. Let's recap what we've learned. A young quarterback made a mistake speeding 41 miles over the limit. He immediately took accountability, showed maturity in his response, and demonstrated the exact kind of leadership qualities you want in a quarterback. But instead of acknowledging this growth and accountability, a sports reporter chose to weaponize the incident for clicks and controversy. What happened next was beautiful to watch. Baker Mayfield's old tweet calling out Cabot's clickbait without facts resurfaced and went viral. Stephen A. Smith provided much-needed perspective about double standards and human mistakes. Lizzie McCoy exposed the systematic way that young black athletes are targeted when critics can't find fault with their performance. James Jones offered wisdom about the realities of being successful while black in America. And the internet did what it does best. It held a mirror up to Cabot's own background and found it wanting. But this story is about more than just one reporter or one incident. It's about accountability, double standards, and the power of collective action. It's about how social media has democratized the ability to challenge biased reporting and demand better from our media figures. The questions we started with have been answered. This was never really about speeding it. It was about a pattern of biased coverage that finally got exposed. It was about the difference between journalism and character assassination. And it was about what happens when people finally say, enough is enough to unfair treatment of young athletes. Shedeur Sanders handled this controversy with more grace and maturity than many veterans would have shown. He took accountability, maintained his composure, and let his supporters speak for him. That's leadership. That's character. And that's exactly what you want from your quarterback. As for Mary Kay Cabot, well, she learned a valuable lesson about the digital age. If you're going to hold others to impossible standards, you better make sure you can meet those standards yourself. Because in 2024, Everyone has a platform, everyone has a voice, and everyone can hold you accountable. The real winner here isn't just Shedeur Sanders, it's accountability itself. And that's a victory we can all celebrate. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Mary Kay Cabot crossed the line from journalism into character assassination? Have you noticed similar patterns of biased coverage in sports media? And most importantly, do you think this controversy will actually change how reporters cover young athletes, or will it be business as usual next week? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this breakdown valuable, smash that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories behind the stories. And if you want to see how media bias affects other young athletes, check out the video I linked on screen. You won't believe what we uncovered there.